Chapter 80. Send-Off. Summary. It's time to go. But, for real now. Let's get a move on. Wait, the branding is working? Yes, I want a dramatic retelling! The air is once again bittersweet as the teens stand by the ship. Their last night with the siblings came and went with smiles and soft chattering into the night, but it was, at last, time to go. Most of the town was surrounding them, waiting to see them off. Light conversation filled the air, and people kept coming up towards them to wish them safe travels and bid them goodbye. The siblings were glued to their side, Pyarpa clinging on to Izuku and Mina's hands. The sun was warm on Izuku's freckled skin. It was something he'd miss once they got back into space. Watching passing stars through the ship's windows just wasn't the same as experiencing it planetside. Just like he knew talking with the siblings wouldn't be the same through a screen. But some things couldn't be helped. Midoriya approached them as another person finished giving their thanks for bringing their kids back. As the person moved along, the pastel blue woman settled in front of them. "It's sad to see you off so soon," she said. Ochako smiled warmly. "We really love it here, but we do need to get back to our own planet sometime this decade." "I understand. I also understand that it's your goal to take down the Trellin, a rather lofty undertaking." "We're up for the challenge, though," Ochako replies, fists pumping determinedly. The woman chuckles. "From what I've heard of you so far, I don't doubt that." "Pyarpa and Fastel sure do think we've got what it takes, don't they?" Izuku laughed, rubbing the back of his head with his free hand. He felt his cheeks heat at the memory of their confidence last night. Midoriya blinked for a second before saying, "While I'm sure that's true, that's not what I was referring to." "If you didn't hear it from Pyarpa or Fastel, who did you hear it from?" Mina questioned, looking down at Pyarpa. The boy looked at her with mirrored confusion. "Your group has quite the reputation, you know." "Really?" Denki exclaimed, leaning towards Midoriya with stars in his eyes. "Yes," she laughed. "I've been looking out for anything to do with traffickers, and your group has been making quite the splash in recent weeks. Only rumors as of now, but they paint quite the picture." Izuku was listening with rapt attention. Their plan was actually working. "I'm sure there's more out there. When there was no mention of our kids, I moved along, but you should hear some of the absurd things being said." "What kind of things?" Mei questioned, leaning in even closer than Denki. "Far-fetched tales, really. While I'm pretty sure the part about you six being Deathworlders is true." Izuku tensed up. "I'm not sure why everyone is painting your arrival as the beginning of some end times. Maybe I'm a bit biased, though. You did return our kids." Izuku let out a shaky breath and smiled at her. "What else have they been saying?" Denki pressed. "Really, it feels silly to even repeat the rumors, but if you insist." Around them, people turned their attention towards Midoriya. She glanced at the crowd with a smile, speaking in a low, dramatic voice. "They tell tales of terrifying, eldritch gods brought into this world by the crimes of the Trellin, maybe woken from a deep slumber or brought into being by the pleas of those suffering. They tell tales of beings that can bend the fundamental forces of the universe to their will. They speak of one as powerful as planets, commanding gravity as easily as others breathe. Whisper rumors of one with unimaginable grace, with the ability to produce a substance that can eat through all matter but themselves. It's hard to imagine the entity they say wields a power even more destructive than fire. Volatile explosions springing from their bare skin. Then there's the Master of Lightning. More evidence to these creatures being gods, because what other being could possibly withstand that much electricity, let alone generate it from the thin air? People look over their shoulder when they talk about the pure embodiment of chaos that has found its way onto this plane, out of sight, but still listening. They weave yarns like no other about the final one, a god that knows no bounds, a horror of unimaginable depiction that heralds from no one realm. Wreathed in sparking green power, faster than the eye can see, tendrils of dark matter spring from it with a mind of their own. Its strength is enough to level mountains, all while it's light enough to float on air. Some have made parallels to it and the creatures of old that used to roam the stars. The unholy offspring of lightning and death itself. Never engage this entity. Your only chance? Hide and pray it does not find you. No one can agree on a name for these beings. Some call them the Pantheon of Aegis, others the new gods or the wandering pantheon. But one thing everyone can agree on is, these gods walk among us. The beach was heavy with silence. Not a single person in the crowd made a sound, even after Melier finished. That is, until Denki whooped, pumping a fist in the air. Being gods is so much cooler than being cryptids! And Izuku had to agree. The way Melier spoke about them, it was just what they were trying to achieve. Even better, in fact. The branding is working, Izuku enthused. The public even named us! Mina squealed. The air seemed to diffuse the tension in the crowd, and soon enough the sound of light-hearted laughter filled the air. Between the buzz of light chatter, Melier leaned over and jokingly asked them, "So, how much of an exaggeration is all that?" Besides the god bit, that was pretty spot on. Not as dramatic as you made it seem, but the power set is all there. Izuku thought for a second, not seeing the horrified look on the sentient's face, then added, "Except the ghosts. Guess that news hasn't traveled." Ghosts? She stuttered. My boy's got ghosts in his blood, Denki enthused. Melier stared at them blankly. Oh, okay. She shook herself. Regardless, you will always have a place on Hades. We can never repay you for all you've done. And with that, she was gone into the crowd. And it was, at last, really time to go. It felt like leaving Oxyus all over again, except the ache in Izuku's chest was different. He looked down at Pyerpa, hand so tightly grasping his own. He looked over at Fastel, who was practically leaning on Ochako. The squeezing around his heart grew even more. He just had to keep reminding himself that this was for the best. The 8 of them walked slowly to the ship. The crowd of the town stood still behind them. Mina was the one to initiate the group hug, wrapping as many people, including Izuku, up in her arms as she could. The ones not in her clutches followed suit, and soon Izuku was surrounded by warmth and love. Tender tears budded in his eyes, and he buried his face in someone's shoulder. Eventually, the group broke apart from their hug, but still huddled close together. We'll come visit, all right? Mina said. It may not be soon. It may not be for a few years, but we'll be back eventually. We'll wait for you, Fastel said, voice tighter than usual. Izuku smiled brightly, blinking his tears back. I'm really gonna miss you guys. You two are our family, Ochako said, wiping tears from her own eyes. Pyerpa nodded, tail briefly wrapping around her leg. We'll call you guys all the time. Yusvila. Family. Denki sniffled. This isn't goodbye, it's see you later. Their goodbyes lasted longer than they reasonably should have, but no one cared. They were all leaving behind people who understood them, who were with them in that little slice of hell. They were leaving their family, unable to be there and protect them anymore. Well, unable to protect them directly. Izuku and the other teens would rid the universe of the Trellin, and then they'd never be able to hurt their little cousins again. But to do that, they had to leave. So, at last, they separated. Pyarpa and Fastel on one side, their village behind them. The teens on the other, the ship behind them. They stood there for a moment more, looking over each other. Izuku took in the two kids, committing every little detail he could to memory. He knew things would fade eventually, but he'd cling on to all he could for as long as he could. Then they turn and walk away. The kids finally home, back to their lives that were stolen from them. The teens back to the stars, still on their journey of vengeance, and eventually home.